Welcome to the next episode of CNMI Speaks Out. CNMI Speaks Out is about domestic violence and CNMI culture. With this podcast, we will hear stories of brave women who overcame domestic violence and know more about their cultural upbringing. I'm your host, Jen Taman, and today we have the privilege of hearing our guest story. However, for safety and confidentiality purposes, our guest identity will remain anonymous. So guests, welcome and thank you so much for being here and sharing with us your story. Okay, so can you tell us a little bit about your story and when did your relationship start? How will you describe your relationship?
Well, my first relationship was when I was age 17, almost age 18, actually. So I had moved to New York where I went to college, and I met this guy who was older than me by 10 years, and everything started wonderful. Like it seemed like everything was fine, but then over time, I think maybe about like a year in or so, he started to get a little mean to me, just verbally, he seemed a little critical. I didn't feel like anything was wrong with it though, because I guess I had gone through my upbringing. I was used to it. I think it was about, there was a time when I was sexually assaulted and I was around age 19. And when he found out, he actually choked me. So that was when the physical side of it started. And that was when, it was actually like more painful, because already being sexually assaulted is a very it's just a terrible thing to experience.
I'm sorry you experienced that.
It's something that I've never really talked about it publicly, so this is my first time to discuss it. But I want to discuss it because I feel that there is such a negative stigma against those who had been sexual assaulted. Like maybe there's a stigma that somehow we are damaged. But I feel like that was an essential part of my journey to finding who I am.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, it basically was a downward spiral, because after I was assaulted by someone that I knew, but I did not have a relationship with him at all. My boyfriend at the time, he also got abusive to me, and I decided to leave him. And just not be around him, because I knew that wasn't good for me. So I graduated from college, I moved into Manhattan, and I started working. But he still, at that time, after graduation, he still had a hold on me, because I was used to him and because that was my first relationship, my first love. I still accepted him into my life. And my parents had visited the city, and he disrespected my parents, and so he was really he was basically just out of control. But I was so blind to it, I couldn't really see it, even though my mom and dad were telling me that he was just a bad person. Anyway, it was about, it was the summer after graduation. I had gotten a job and found a place to stay, or at least I was depending on him for a place to stay. But then he actually choked me again. So I decided that was it. I called a friend of mine, and who helped me move all my things out. He also, mind you, he also wanted me to get married to his friend for his papers, for like a green card, and I said no. So Yeah, so he wanted me to get married to his friend, and I knew deep down like there was something wrong with that. So I decided that, I had to leave, I had to get out before it just got worse. So thankfully, I was strong enough to call a friend, and my friend picked me up, picked up all my belongings, and I found a place to stay. So, then after that, I realized that, the next relationship I was in, it seemed okay, but it was still an unhealthy relationship because he wasn't emotionally available, and there were certain things that that he did that was hurtful for me. Like when I wanted to express myself, he would walk away and like he would just leave, not even give me a chance to express myself. And so, again, this happened, and there was no there was no violence. It wasn't violent at all, but just an act of not allowing your partner communication is also a very it's a psychological, yes indeed. So after 2.5 years of that, it actually got I couldn't tolerate it anymore, so I cut the relationship, and I was single for a long time because I was actually very hurt about it. I was very heartbroken about losing that relationship.
Right.
So I needed healing, and I did go on a spiritual journey for that.
Okay.
I will say, I had some issues with commitment because of the harm that had occurred to me before. I was afraid to be in a relationship because I was afraid of being hurt.
Yeah.
So what that led me down was a road of just kind of just like not being too serious and about the people I had dated. I was just not really interested in
It's like
going
you
deeper.
build a wall.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Like I had built a wall around myself and my heart, and that was it. I was just unable to truly open myself up to a healthy relationship.
Yeah, I
So-
get you, but you are not damaged. You're such a beautiful person, and you're so brave for speaking out and sharing your story with me and our listeners, and I thank you for that. So, so when and how did you come to a realization that you were in a domestic relationship? Like you said earlier, it was just like shouting, and then it started to get worse, or
Oh yes. It was basically verbal at first, and then as the violations occurred, as the disrespect continued to compound, then the person that I was in a relationship with thought it's okay, like let me take this a step further. And that's the way, I guess, that's the way abusers are, is
they test the boundaries first, I guess.
Yes.
And then first it's just shouting, raising their voice, and then comes the insult, and then comes the control, and then comes the physical. I mean, I don't know for your experience, but my experience was somewhat like that. It was just first it was just shouting at me, and then insulting me little by little, and then he just pushing me a little bit, pulling my hair a little bit, just I guess when you look at it, it's like testing the waters. How was it for you?
Exactly. It's just like that, testing the waters to see what am I going to tolerate? What am I going to do? And so it took me a long time to build myself up to where I'm at now. It took me years, I would say, of healing, and this, I guess I realized it little by little, but it wasn't until most recently that I was able to say, I deserve better than this. And I actually came up with a vision of what I deserve, what I want in a relationship. and I would always write it down. I'll always write
awesome.
down, like, yeah. So after, after a relationship that was, broke up, or, even in my current relationship, I always write down, what is it that I want? And it took me a lot of, time to decide for myself what I wanted, because it all relied on my self-concept. But I wanted to also mention that when I was growing up, like when I was a little girl, my parents also had issues in their relationship. And I know, like, I'm out of respect to them, I'm not going to talk about what they went through, but I know that in my mother's pain when I was a little girl, going through what she was going through, she told me that, I was an illegitimate child. And when my mom found out she was pregnant, she, I guess they had discussed, and they thought maybe abortion would be like one of the ways to go. And my mom went to an abortion clinic, and when the doctor showed her what procedure they would do to the fetus, she ran out crying and said, "I'm sorry, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to have this baby." And my mother went through a lot, because her parents disowned her when they found out that she was pregnant before marriage. And they were very very rigid parents, and respectable people, but they cared a lot about what everyone else thought. So my mom would tell me that before, when she went to a rosary and she kissed her father, he turned to her and said, "Who are you? I don't know you." Wow. And so that was my mother's experience while she was pregnant with me. And when I was about 5 years old, my mom tried to explain it to me, but the way it came out was, she said, "You were a mistake." And it was because, I guess, she was going through something at the time, and the way it came out was like that. But I, as a little girl, internalized that belief that my life is a mistake. I wasn't supposed to be born. So I was going through my whole life thinking that my life is a mistake. I don't have value. Like, my life is not valuable or precious. And I didn't get that kind of love from my mother. I love my mother, and actually today our relationship is the best it had ever been. But growing up, I feel for her too, because she was also a victim of domestic relationships. Maybe not in the physical way, but definitely in a mental, psychological, emotional, spiritual. And so when I came back to Guam, after years of being away, I wanted to find out, what is my family's history in terms of abuse, like physical, mental, emotional abuse. Ooh. So I came to Guam. I was away in the States for 8 years, and then I returned to Guam, where I was born and raised. And I wanted healing. That was what I wanted. I wanted healing. I knew that my life in the States was good. I mean, I was fine materialistically, but spiritually, emotionally, I knew that I was in need of connection and in need of wholeness. So I came home, and I wanted to seek wholeness and healing through expressing my voice, through music and poetry, because for me that felt very healing. So in my first years back on Guam, actually, a lot of family history was uncovered, and I found out that my mother also went through something. Even my brother, my family went through issues. Okay. And then I ended up finding out that the person that was the abuser was actually someone within, like an uncle. Wow. An uncle. And So I was able to connect whatever had happened to me and whatever had happened to my family. There was someone in our family that was also the perpetrator.
Okay.
Yeah, and so when I discovered this, I wondered then, how far did this go back? And actually, I was so angry at that man for so long. But then I guess somehow in my time, like towards the end of my time on Guam, I managed to forgive him. And thankfully it was before he passed away.
Yeah.
But I actually did talk with him about it. I asked him, like, why did he do it? And he mentioned something about like his like pain, and there's no justification for abuse.
No.
But I definitely wanted to speak with him, and I wanted to know more. And I was really glad that I was able to actually talk to him and ask him about why did he do it. And I managed to forgive him, because part of my process of healing was actually the process of healing anything is forgiveness. Forgiveness has to be one of the steps. And when you forgive someone, you set them free, but you set yourself free more.
Yeah.
And I realized that, this is not just something that happened right like in present day to me. This is in our cellular memories. It's called intergenerational trauma. And I even found out most recently that, why is it that in our relationships as Indigenous people, why it's not just in relationships with our significant other, but it's also in like friendships, among acquaintances, with people in our community. People actually do things that's, I won't generalize, but there's a lot of wrongs that are done, like just disrespectful things that is not our culture, but it's done because I'll speak for myself. I was used to conflict in my childhood.
So, yeah.
And so it's almost like a habit that conflict without a conflict is almost like, oh, what's going on? Like without a drama, what's going on?
Yeah.
So yes, I realized that, and I thought, okay, so I'm used to some form of conflict, but then what if I just release myself from that cycle of conflict?
Yeah.
And it's been an ongoing journey for me, because even in my current relationship, I didn't realize that I was also, we have our own intergenerational things going on. But it's been a process of communication, of healing, even just admitting that this is what had happened to us, not denying it, not covering it up and suppressing, and just making the change. But my current relationship, it has not been a smooth ride, but we've definitely come a long way.
I was gonna ask you, how does your, experience from the past change your outlook now in life? But you kind of like did touch on it, and then I wanted to know, like, how, earlier you said you were single for a while, you weren't serious with anybody because of, you were afraid of being hurt again. So with your past, how did that affect your relationship now with your partner?
Okay. So, healing from sexual trauma, healing from relationships where I was not treated with love and respect. At first, I came into this relationship with a less of an expectation, not really knowing, what it was that I wanted, except that, I know he says he loves me. I mean, he expresses that, and I also love him. But I really didn't have any sort of like, what's it called? You know, when you have like expectations of how you behave kind of thing.
Yeah.
And so, you know, he carried in his old like ways into our relationship. But you know what? I stood up for myself.
Oh, good for you.
Yeah, so I stood up for myself, and actually I would stand up and I would tell him that I do not tolerate this kind of thing. This is not, I do not tolerate this. This is what I want. And if you cannot be, if this is what you can, if you can do this, great, we can continue. But if you cannot do this, then this relationship cannot and will not happen. And that was, to me, the thing that really empowered me, because I had, in our past, I actually had packed up my car before and left, even if that meant returning back to my parents' house, living with my family, not having that, not having the relationship. I was willing to sacrifice everything in my relationship with this man that I love, and our destinies seem to be like aligned. But I was willing to sacrifice all of that for myself and my daughter, for us to be treated, for me to be treated with respect and honor and love and kindness, gentleness, tenderness. Those kinds of things to me really are so important. And I actually did pack up my car. So I did leave him several times. And I did put my foot down, actually. And I will never, in the beginning, it used to be something where, like, if it was an argument, I would actually kind of participate. But then what ended up changing was I decided even arguing is not a behavior that or even just allowing someone to raise a voice at me, or to talk to, or to even get frustrated, because adults don't lose their cool like that.
Yeah.
We communicate and express, we allow each other to express. Yeah. And so I learned this process called nonviolent communication. And actually you can find videos on it on YouTube. You can find a lot of videos. So look up nonviolent communication or compassionate communication. And so I learned more about how to communicate without triggering a person, because we all have our traumas, and you never know what could be said that might trigger, right?
Yeah.
So I learned that a few years ago, and so I applied it. And I don't, so like if something comes up and it's a sensitive issue, I do not yell, and I do not allow anyone else's emotions to affect me. But so there were a lot of different things I learned, but that was the most helpful thing, is that if they want to participate in that, that's on them. But like, I choose not to even engage in any sort. And if I don't like it, and this is not part of my contract. So a relationship, right?
It's a contract.
Yeah, it's a contract.
That's true. Wow, I like that. I think that's so good that you set your boundaries and you stood by them. That's amazing. So after, like, in the past, right, after you realized you were in a violent or controlling relationship, did you reach out for help or talk to anyone about it? How did it go?
Okay, so definitely. There were, before this relationship years ago, even before my daughter's father, I was in a relationship where a guy held a machete at me. And he was like, if you don't do this. So after that, I was like, pack your bags, go. And I actually went to my family for support. And even though my parents were like upset, and even though they were upset, and even though it's a shameful thing, like it's an embarrassing thing if your relationship fails. Of course we're going to feel embarrassed. Of course we're going to feel ashamed if a relationship that everyone thought was good fails. But I still had the humility and just the ability to go and say to my parents, this is what happened. This is what happened, and this is really what I have to do. I have to leave this relationship because I don't want to get hurt. I don't want to let it go further where I can get physically harmed and possibly lose my life. Or lose my, it could be, it doesn't have to go that far, but basically what the perpetrator could do is threaten to make you lose your job or anything good you have going for you. So for me, that was it. I had to go to my mom and dad. Yeah. And thankfully I had my parents. My mom was a little, like, I know that my mom probably would get more emotional than my dad and more upset, but I'm willing to bite the bullet, and I'm willing to have to sit through it. And my mom and dad would even lecture me on.
Yeah, I was about to ask what were their reaction, or how did they reacted to the saying that reacted to the situation that they were put in, I guess, or how in the situation that you were in, how did your family and friends reacted?
Well, it's, of course, I felt shame. I felt ashamed every time if a relationship had failed. Right. That was a shameful thing. But I think that people, my parents, were very, even though they would talk with me about it and they would lecture me and, give me advice, I'll just sit through it. And I'll let them, tell me and let them guide me through it. Outside of my parents, friends, I'm very thankful that I have a friend who is she's getting her PhD from Columbia University in narrative medicine. Oh, wow. And she's also a therapist. So when I was much weaker earlier on in my life, I'm so thankful for her, who really was there for me to talk with. So I think that it's important that if you are a victim and a survivor, it's important that you find friends who are actually willing to not judge you and who will talk with you and who will not blame you for it, and who will just try and be as not just to listen. So I will suggest, if you whatever your religion is or whatever your beliefs are, just ask God, pray to God in your time of need. And I truly believe that God, the Creator, is going to give you that support. And so in any time that I had a problem, I always ask God for help. And God always put someone in my life who could really help me. And so that's why I'm really thankful, Jen, that you are actually so brave to be an advocate for men and women who are survivors and also victims. And that's why I'm also being brave enough to really share my personal journey, no matter what anyone thinks, because I know that there's people out there who are listening to this now, and maybe they're where I was, where I was, and just wishing that there's someone who would hear them out and who would help them.
Someone they can relate to, right? Because I was feeling that I don't know who can understand. I do have friends, right? And I don't think they would ever understand the things that I went through or what I felt. Yeah. Not because they weren't sympathetic or whatever, or anything like that. It's just that it wasn't something they experienced.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Well, it's just being able to empathize with another human being who is suffering is one of the greatest gifts that you can give to a human being, and just to be able to wish them the best in life. And it doesn't take a lot to help guide someone down the right way. I'm also a teacher, and and even like what we're doing right now, it's a valuable source of guidance, and sharing. So I always feel like if someone needs a little help, why not just like take some time, or take, just give a little or give what you can, because that, you never know, like that might mean the world to them. So just letting go of pride. Pride is probably the most the thing that stops people from being vulnerable. But I'm here to let you know, whoever's listening, that we can be vulnerable, yet powerful and strong.
That's true. That's awesome. You're so awesome.
Oh, thank you. You are too.
Okay, I'll just go start. And so do you believe that do you believe that your culture or your upbringing contributed to how you responded to domestic violence? I know earlier you said that you experienced it, and can you give a more vivid example of what's the internal generational trauma?
Oh, definitely. Actually, I will not say that I'm a professional. I'm not an expert in a professional sense. However, as a survivor, I've done so much research on this for the past decade. It's been actually a source of my investigations into why is this happening to me. I'm a Native woman, and this is like, why am I going through so much pain? And when I went home and I went deeper into the history of the Chamorro people, and I urge anyone out there, like if you are of Refaluwash descent, if you're of Filipino descent, or any other background, I mean, and even people of Caucasian, European descent can be victims and survivors. But I went into my personal family history, and I went into the history of our Chamorro people. And what I discovered was that, it started from colonization. It started from the genocide that had occurred. And so I'm actually teaching Chamorro studies now, and I'm actually teaching like youth of Chamorro, Refaluwash, Filipino, and like other backgrounds, all diverse backgrounds here in Saipan, about Chamorro, everything with Chamorro history, language, culture. But yes, thank you. So I talk to them about the actual history, that prior to colonization, our ancestors lived very peaceful, harmonious lives. In fact, Fray Juan Pobre wrote about their lives and said there was no child abuse. And children grow up to be very productive members of society. Families are very in tune, they're harmonious. And he said these natives are more they're more godlike than the Christians in Europe. They're living according to God's ways. And then I read about the 30-year war. So there was a 30-year rebellion that had occurred. And actually, this is really going deeper into the Marianas history, because the Spaniards even moved the Chamorros that were living up in Saipan, moved them down to Guam. So this was part of the reduction of the Chamorro people, and the genocide. And so, in fact, as I was going by boat from Saipan to Luta, I passed Aguiguen at Goat Island. And actually that is the site of the last battle. There was a last standoff between the Chamorros and the Spaniards. So, people don't know that they had actually, the Spaniards, the Jesuits, were actually going and killing the men. Any able-bodied men, they were being murdered by the Spaniards because they would pose a threat. They were raping women.
Oh, wow.
So there was actually systematic rape going on.
Systematic rape.
It was systematic, yes. They would rape women. And so there was a whole period where women were like killing their babies that had been born from this rape. They were throwing them like off cliffs. They were basically killing them because they, it was just so tragic. Like, can you imagine your husband or boyfriend or your son or, like your father, your cousins and relatives, your male relatives being murdered, and then you're being raped, and then you don't know, like you give birth and you don't know what to do. Yes, it's like, it's really tragic because it was actually the women that had carried the burden of our culture, of even the trauma. And so when I had learned more and more about our history as a people, and just even the history of the land we're living on and of our ancestors, I realized this intergenerational trauma, ever since that had occurred, ever since the genocide had occurred, it carries on in our memories. Even though we don't know it, it's subconsciously ingrained that, there are certain things that we are carrying. Like trauma does travel through the generations. And so even those who are survivors of World War II, those are our grandparents, or my father actually is a World War II survivor.
Wow.
Because of his age. Yeah, so he's an 85-year-old. Would love, yes, of course,
I would love to talk to him and just share stories. I've always been interested in World War II history. Okay. It's exciting.
Yeah. Well, I would love for you to interview him about his experiences as well, and to document that.
Oh
yeah. I'm just, when we think about even like the war and what they went through in the war, and his eldest brother was killed in the war, and he tells me those stories about loss. Even his aunt had a baby, and she's running from the battle, and she falls, and the baby dies.
Oh no.
So there's so much tragedy and loss that's in the memories of our people. And I say our people inclusive because whether we're Chamorro, Refaluash, Filipino, or any other background, we do share, we share this land, we share our our histories. Maybe like there's overlapping histories, or even relating to war that we had survived. So healing from war is such a big thing, and sometimes some of us think, well, we don't know what war means, but then our grandparents, they know what it means.
Yeah.
Our parents actually went through things like, for example, child abuse. Let's just use that example of child abuse. Mm-hmm. Let's use that in a way of understanding intergenerational trauma. Right. So child abuse was, at one point, it was considered okay to do. So the spanking. I was spanked, but spanking affected me negatively. And my mom was also spanked, but worse than me, because she got, her father spanked with a cow whip or something. It was worse. In order to wake them up in the morning to go to school, they would be dunked with ice, or he would flip the mattress.
Wow. Okay.
And so those things are just conditioned in our minds. And even just withholding emotions. So withholding emotions, withholding love as a punishment in in any relationship, that's also an abuse. Mm-hmm. But we don't know it, or maybe people are not aware of it because it was so common growing up, it's so accepted. Right. And so now we're at this point where we're speaking up about it. Right. And we're realizing, wait a minute, withholding love and affection. Right. Is actually abuse. It's not really. How do we work with people and teach them that that this is actually and it's an intergenerational trauma and cycle that we have to break.
Yep.
But it stemmed from somewhere. And when I looked at my grandparents' life, and there, of course, there was war. I didn't get to ask them, how did they discipline you or punish you. But I do know that they were also punished, like in schools. They were punished. They were paddled for speaking Chamorro.
Yeah.
There was a lot more that we don't know, and that's lost in time. The memory that they had, and so this is why it's so important. These types of interviews are just so important to document,
Right.
because these are our oral histories.
Right.
But basically, going back to the intergenerational trauma, I found that for a lot of people that had come to me and talked to me about their, like, whatever abuse they had gone through, even if it was like a sexual one, a molestation, even incest. Believe it or not, it's like more common than we think.
Yeah.
And it's the most terrible thing we can experience. But I actually, for people who had talked to me about it, I had asked them, like, did this happen to your parent?
Right.
Did this happen in your family? For like, when did it? And so what I found, that it was basically a cycle of the perpetrator that was once the victim.
Yeah.
And that person was actually a victim when they were young, and it basically was passed down. And so
It became a cycle.
Definitely.
Yeah, right. So
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I know one of our counselors at CHCC, that was something he talked about too, just like, kids seeing it at a young age, and then they become grown adult or men, and either they became the victim themselves or the perpetrator themselves. And I think it's about time that our generation, or this generation, that we break that cycle, that will cycle.
Definitely, yeah. Yes.
So, what advice do you wish you would have given yourself before the violence began? What would have you told yourself?
Well, if I were to tell my younger self, I would actually tell my younger self, you are precious, you are cherished, you are loved, you are so important in the grand scheme of things. You have a purpose here on earth. I would nurture my younger self. I would, yeah.
Go ahead.
It's so good, I would love my younger self. And you know what? I want to admit this to you. Before I had my daughter, I was kind of gave up.
Yeah.
I kind of gave up on life.
Yeah.
Because I felt that my life, I felt like I was damaged inside.
Yeah.
I thought, I'm not worthy. I'm not worthy.
Oh, you are worthy.
Yes, motherhood was the best thing that happened to me, because my daughter gave me a chance to be who I needed, and to give and to show myself I can break the cycle. I can break that cycle because of her.
Yeah.
Because I want her to have a better life than me. And as parents, especially as parents, that's what we should want for our children. We should not be envious or jealous if they have it better than us. We should not feel like we have to give them a hard time because we had a hard time. Actually, we are here to pave the way for them. They are the future. And so, if you don't have a child, I would say that, a lot of the healing comes when you can actually, through any sort of service and building yourself up, but also giving. It's through giving that we receive. Yeah, and that's a spiritual thing, but I understand we may not be able to give right away, but the nurturing part, self-nurturing, self-love, tell yourself every day. This is what I would tell myself, is like, I can actually change my life by talking, giving myself the love I need, self-nurturing, self-love, even being like your own mother. Even being your own mother, or your own mother, is, even if your mother, like, let's just say that maybe you lost your mother, or you feel like you cannot talk to your mother about this, you can actually be your own mother and like have a conversation, or even through like writing, journaling. And it's a process in order to get rid of all those negative beliefs that will haunt you and put you down or make you feel like you don't deserve it. But you actually deserve your life. You deserve your life. You deserve a future, and even your present. And even though things happen to you in the past, bad things, it doesn't define who you are. In fact, it makes you better. It makes you capable of understanding and empathizing and helping another human being. It helps you, it can make you even more of a rich person. So don't ever give up, and just know that there's a way out of it. And actually, my father, when I was really young, my father told me that there's going to be times in life when you fall down, and you might even fall in. Life has many potholes. Life has gutters. Life has twists and turns. But he said, if you ever find that you fall into a gutter, never ever just look straight ahead or look down. Always lift your head up to the sky and look at the sunshine, and you'll find your way out.
That's true. Well said. Well said. I know we're both crying, but it's so touching, and I'm so mesmerized and inspired with your strength. You're such a powerful woman, and I just met you like, we just talked like just recently, and like I can feel the power and your strength, like it's vibing through like this small distance that we have right now. You're such a powerful person, and I'm sure that you inspire a lot of people.
Thank you so much, as you are too. Really appreciate it.
So, what do you wish the CNMI community understood about domestic violence?
I would like all of you to know that domestic violence, it may seem very common. It may seem like it's part of like a way of life, and for those of you who are enduring it right now, maybe you feel like you love this person so much and you don't want to let go. But I want you to know that you're not losing out on anything if you decide to put your foot down for yourself and for your children, if you have any children. And if you don't, maybe your future children. But like, you're not losing anything. You're not losing anything if you decide to say no to domestic violence and to walk away. And even if that means that if you walk away and you don't know where you're going to stay, and you're feeling so ashamed and embarrassed that you lost your relationship and you have to go and ask a family or member or a friend to stay there, even if it means that you lose your belongings, I say that, you know what, you may feel like you're so scared and that you have to hold on because of that, but I can assure you from my own experience that you're actually not losing anything. You're gaining a better life, you're gaining a better future, and you're going to be fine. And in fact, you just reach out for help. Even if you have to reach out to me or to Jen, or and even if it's someone you may not know, but you just have to You know that person will listen and hear you out and help you get the resources you need, even if it's a hotline. Reach out. But I would just say, don't be afraid to set your boundaries and walk away if you have to, because it may hurt to lose that person, but I can assure you that you will find somebody better. And once you set your expectations of what you want, I urge you also, like, even if you're in your situation now, take a piece of paper and a pen and write a list. You can go ahead and write on one column, create 2 columns on that piece of paper. On the left side, write out the old, like write out what you have in your present moment. For example, like if he's or she is, taking your money or hitting you or abusing you physically, mentally, verbally. If they're doing that, write down everything that they're doing. Right. And then what you do is on the right column, write out what you want. So like if that person's, like, let's just say that person's putting you down, on the right column say, I deserve my significant other to speak to me with love, to build me up, to uplift me. Like, write out what you want, and then what you do is when you're done with that, cross out all the bad stuff on the left, on that other column, cross that out. And because that's going to help you clarify or make clear what you really want. And when you know what you want from a relationship and from your significant other, you're going to actually be more courageous to stand up for it, and you're going to actually do anything that you need to do to get what you want. Exactly. And I'm telling you, I promise you, if you follow my advice and it goes wrong, then go ahead and reach out to Jen and be like, hey, Primitiva was wrong. Like she was just like, that was bad advice. Go ahead and say that. But I promise you and I guarantee you that if you take a leap of faith, just take a leap of faith and look towards the sunshine and find your future, a better life for yourself.
That's true.
You're going to end up so much happier, and you're gonna have like a much better life,
a better version of yourself, right? That's the aim. So I know, like you said earlier, right, that your healing for you was through music. So I just wanted, is it okay, and if you're giving me your consent, to play it on my podcast? Yes.
Oh yes, definitely. Yeah.
You just gotta put that in there. Is it okay if you play a little song for us, just to share like what helped you with your healing? Okay, go ahead.
So I mean, I believe in the arts. I believe in any form of self-expression, whether it's through visual arts, whether it's through the spoken word, written word, even the singing, music, singing, chanting, playing an instrument, whatever it is, or anything that you have, any way that you express yourself, that is a very effective method of healing. And so my method of healing is through singing and writing songs. So this song that I'm going to play for you today is called Maga Haga, and it means the chiefess or the queen. And so it was actually received by a healer, and I, along with the healer, it was a message from the ancestors that I am to sing this song to remind our people, especially our Famalawan, our women, their strength. And so even for all of you men out there, you are Magalahi, and our women, you are Magahaga. You are kings and queens. So always carry yourself and know that you are a king, you are a queen. So this is called Magahaga, and is basically talking about all the roles of the women in her home how she nurtures her children, how she is the nurturing of her village, and also where she gets her strength from the sunshine, from the ancestors and from God. Imagahaga mesmuni famagunya Rita numa igwinaita ifamagunya Ifamagunya uangoku imagahaga Nima puksa ihulugi imanya Imatugi ikananya imagahaga Imatugi ikananya imagahaga Wahakumekeleknya Imatugi ikananya imagahaga Ilinalanya imagahaga kumekeleknya Imaatota Imatugi ikananya imagahaga Imaatota Imatugi ikananya imagahaga Imangafa maukti magahaga Kiatuka hafanati nataganya Sagwitay sanania kising sonya Imagahaga magufliin nung itaw niya Imatugi ikananya imagahaga Imagahaga Imatugi ikananya imagahaga Wahakumekeleknya Imatugi ikananya imagahaga Sigwa anti na iimagahaga Lui kanamu atin matagine hagu Ininanataw medgud na inamlu Edzagi tatoyay gota magahaga Imatugi ikananya imagahaga Imagahaga Imatugi ikananya imagahaga Wahakumekeleknya Imatugi ikananya imagahaga You are powerful, you are loved, you are cherished, you are not broken, you are whole. Imagahaga, you are Magahaga. This is dedicated to all of you Magahagats and Magalahi. Stay strong because you are strong and you have a bright future ahead of you. Saina maasi and hugwaza hamzu.
Oh my gosh, that is so beautiful. Like the minute you start playing the chord or something, I don't even know. I'm not a musician. You just touched my heart. Thank you so much for that. That's so amazing. You're so amazing.
Thank you too. You are amazing too. You are amazing as well. Again, thank you so much, Jen, for doing this powerful and sacred work for all of us in our community, and for being so courageous and strong to stand up and be an advocate for change and for breaking this cycle. And thank you so much for having me here.
It's my pleasure. My pleasure. It's my pleasure.
And you know what? You're an amazing woman.
Thanks.
So I look forward to seeing this podcast, this talk show grow. And again, sana makasi to the Northern Marianas Humanities Council for supporting Jen and for supporting this whole community here in the Marianas with this very important and very sacred work.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, thank you so much.
Thank
you. Oh my. Well, that's the end of our podcast, and I just would like to say thank you so much for being here and sharing your marvelous story with us. And for our listeners out there, I hope you're able to enjoy the song as much as I did. And healing, it can come in, there's no standard way or procedures in the process of healing. Healing can be in any type of form. It could be in the form of art, music, or self-care, whatever it is. It has so much variety. Whatever it is that you enjoy, healing comes in so many forms and in so many ways. And that always remember that healing starts from within. To our listeners out there, hope you all enjoyed today's episode, and thank you for tuning in with us. Please come back again next week as we talk more about domestic violence and CNMI culture. Lastly, if you are experiencing domestic violence or know someone who might be experiencing domestic violence, please call 911 or CNMI's victim hotline at 670-234-5100. Thank you, and please tune in again next week. The CNMI Speaks Out has been made possible in part by a major grant from the Northern Marianas Humanities Council and the National Endowment for the Humanities. Any views, finding, conclusion, or recommendation expressed in this podcast do not necessarily represent those of the Northern Marianas Humanities Council or the National Endowment for the Humanities.